Hello and welcome to the Deb Calvert channel on Bright Talk. I see a lot of you who are coming back, the regulars. You already know what I'm about to tell folks who are here for the first time, which is be sure and notice the attachments and links. I always try to include for you a PDF copy of the slides that I'll be covering. And so if you are someone who likes to download those in advance to take notes, please note that those are right there waiting for you. I will also be referencing several of the other attachments as we go. I've loaded it up today with some bonus content, so you'll want to be sure and notice that tab. Other things that you ought to know if you're new to Bright Talk, first of all, they have a great tech team. If you experience any issues during this webcast, by all means, please feel free. They'll come up and chat with you right away. Click that button that says Get Live Support Now. If you send that information to me via a question, unfortunately, there's just not much that I can do with that information. So go direct to the source, get live support if you need it. But do send me questions if you have them. I will take them as they come. I'll weave them into the presentation as best as I can, and we'll pick up any at the end that I'm unable to get to. As I said, this is the Deb Calvert channel, People First Productivity Solutions. I'm Deb Calvert. And I am presenting here about once a month to folks in management and human resources. You can go back and pick up any of the previous content that I've posted here over the past 4 or 5 years. There are many, many topics available. And while you're looking at the channel, take a look at the ones that I've already posted for the rest of this year. I may add some, but there are a number of topics that you might find are of interest, and you can register for those right away, and then you'll get reminders when we get closer to the actual presentation date. I have a background in human resources as well as in operations and in sales, and I work a lot in the field of employee engagement. So I'll be speaking to you from the point of view of someone who works with many, many different companies, and I do executive coaching as well as consulting work. So my perspective is coming from many different industries and points of view. Today, we are going to be talking about the things that you can do to boost the effectiveness of your team. And this is for anyone who is a team leader or who has an opportunity to consult internally with teams, or maybe you're just a team member. You're on a team of peers, and you'll also find that there are some tips and tools that are useful for you as well. Let's first talk about what do I even mean when I say making your team effective. I really like this definition of team effectiveness because it incorporates a very important point. Ideally, what's happening when teams are effective is that whatever they set out to do, the team collectively was formed for a reason. They have a shared mutual purpose. Right? That purpose would be well served, and an effective team will do a good job of making sure to meet the needs and reach those objectives for the team. But check out the other part of this definition. It's equally important. Really effective teams also make sure that each individual member of the team has an opportunity to reach their own goals and objectives too. It's not that you have to altruistically give something to the team that takes something away from you. Nope, we're upping the standard. Ideally, your personal goals and the team goals get met, and all members of the team are looking out for each other and supporting one another so that the whole of all the goals can be met. Obviously, there are several things that influence this. It has a lot to do with how group members understand and view each other and interact with each other. And it has something to do with how resources are allocated and how easy it is or is not to access those resources. To make this happen, obviously there has to be a lot of clarity, including the clarity of who's responsible for what. And knowing the group purpose, knowing how you fit within the group will help each individual to figure out ways that they can contribute and how they can align the work they're doing with the group and the work that they're doing on their own. So the skills that are required for all of this, just a couple of them are listed here. Being able to be truly collaborative, not the same thing as compromising. Being able to resolve conflicts, that doesn't mean avoid them. It means engage in healthy and productive conflicts and then resolve them for the good of the group. And it also means being able to have cross-functional understanding, an awareness of what the priorities are and the needs are of each other member of the team. Now, if you want to assess your team and figure out if you've got these opportunities to be more effective, or you've got some gold stars that you ought to be recognizing and preserving because your team is effective in certain ways, I gave you an attachment that is a very simple self-assessment of a team. There are other more sophisticated tools. I'll mention those perhaps before we're done, but this little download will give you a start on identifying the sorts of things that make your team effective and the kinds of things you could be considering if there's a gap and you need to diagnose what it would take to make your team more effective. What we're after here is not only team effectiveness, but ongoing development of the team as well. We want these teams that we're creating for people and working with for people to be well-developed. Well-developed teams are the ones that go through the process, you've probably heard it before, the process that was originally introduced by psychologist Bruce Tuckman, right? Tuckman's the guy who came up with that memorable phrase for teams, which is that teams have to go through forming, storming, norming, and performing. He did this way back in 1965. It's a great article if you ever want to look it up, called Developmental Sequence in Small Groups. But he used those four parts, forming, storming, norming, and performing, to describe the path that most teams will follow on their way to high performance. Now later on, he added a fifth stage, which was adjourning, making sure that the team comes to its natural conclusion and that things are wrapped up in a tidy fashion. But let me talk for just a moment about what a team leader, formal or informal leader, would be looking for the team to do at each one of those four stages. When the team is first forming, it's important for someone to give the team direction, to establish clear objectives for the team. That includes the pathway, it includes the expectations for reaching that collective goal, as well as taking into account the goals of each individual on the team. That's what you want ideally as the team takes shape and comes together. And like it or not, there's going to be a stage, it's natural, it's actually healthy, there's going to be a stage where the team does some storming. This is where people are jockeying for position. It's where there's a little bit of tension as people don't fully understand their place in the team or how their work should intersect as opposed to colliding. People don't necessarily trust each other just because they're put onto a team together. They certainly may not really know each other, and they don't know their place in the team. So the storming is a natural phase. It's how teams evolve. There are lots of tools that are designed to help teams work through that process. You've probably heard of some of them, like the Myers-Briggs type indicator, that's MBTI, or the DISC assessment. There's one called TKI, which is a really good tool for understanding people's various conflict styles. I like the echo listening assessment as well for this purpose. And by the way, if you want to know more about assessment tools, I did put a webcast up here earlier this year. It's been very popular, lots of views on that one, but it walks you through all the different types of assessment tools that you can use for teams or for individuals in an organization. Okay, so after the team has come together, they formed, and they're working through this process of getting acquainted, and that's storming. Now the team begins to do its norming. Right? People are able to take responsibility. A leader should actually step back and allow all the team members to share in the responsibility for making progress toward the goal. And the team will then find its cadence, its rhythm, and it will start performing. Here's where, as a leader, you might do some delegation of tasks and projects. But really, once the team is performing, they're going to need to be empowered, and the team leader should no longer need to be visible and authoritative in any way. And when you do adjourn, be sure that you don't leave out the part about celebrating the team achievements. Now, I tell you all of that because I'm giving you 10 specific things that you can do to make your team more effective, and I've attempted to organize them in roughly this order because I think that just will make more sense. You know where your team is in its own progression, so these tips that I give you will follow that progression. But of course, there's some overlap. Right? You'll notice that there are more steps to take in forming and storming. That's just because that's where teams do need the most support. And if teams are ineffective, it's because they've probably never really done the work to properly and fully form and storm. And then later on, team leaders, you heard me say that they had to pull back once the team is established. So there's not as much that you can or should do when the teams are high performing in those ways. Now, incidentally, what I'll be displaying to you here, everything I'm displaying, it also works for established teams. Sometimes it's necessary to do a team reset. I do a lot of work with senior teams and with functional teams because they've lost their way. They've become fragmented or siloed or polarized or have some other dysfunction within the team. And so we need a reset. And the same tools are what we'd use, the same tips and techniques. If people are not working well together, or if projects and deliverables are stalled out due to interpersonal issues, or if team members don't have a clear sense of their roles within the team, that's how you know that some or all of these tools might be effective for you. So first of all, let's talk about these steps. Not all of them involve tools, but the first step, the thing that the team needs first, is a shared vision. Why has this team been assembled? What is it that's expected of this team? Why is the work this team is about to do going to matter? And who will it matter to? And how will it matter? What difference will this team's work ultimately make? People need to know all of this as they're drawn into a team. It's not just extra work. It needs to have a purpose. And if you don't give them a purpose, if the team doesn't have a unified purpose, well, you know what happens. People, they make stuff up. They make assumptions. And then you've got different people working toward different visions, and things fall apart pretty quickly when that happens. So on top of knowing why the team exists and why the work of that team matters and who's going to benefit, on top of all of that, to be a truly effective team, we also need to make sure people understand how individual team members are going to benefit. Are they going to benefit only at the end when there's some outcome? Or are there some additional benefits along the way that come from the learning and development opportunities, the collaborations, the exposure, the ways that the team's work will enhance their own work and make it easier for them to reach the goals they're personally responsible for? And when you put it all together, there's some ideal state. Maybe it's the definition I gave you of team effectiveness, that the shared and individual goals are all being met. Or maybe it's something bigger, broader. Name it. Help the team to claim it. Make sure that they see what it is that success will look like. If you've never done this work thoughtfully and deliberately, I promise you that it will be worth the time. The team that has not done this work is a team that sometimes flounders. They get caught up in minutia and tactics and details. They're in the weeds without being able to see the horizon, the place that they're aiming for. So help them to get that shared vision and occasionally remind them that that's what the work is really all about. With that vision, we can now get a little bit more tactical. It's a good idea on any team. It's a very good idea to establish a team charter. A team charter defines for people how they're going to interact with each other, the sorts of things that they ought to consider for each other and for the team every time they engage. That means that there will be some ground rules. How does the team behave? How often do you meet? When you're meeting, how do you conduct yourselves? Those ground rules up front, clearly stated, codified into a charter, keep people accountable. And it's a best practice. It's a bonding, trust-building exercise to allow people to work on a team charter, starting with those ground rules. And as you're forming the team, allow time for people to understand the work that other team members do. Allow time for people to express how they feel that the team's work will enhance their own work. And if it's true, let them also express their concerns about how the work of the team, the attention they have to devote to the team, could be problematic for reaching their individual goals. Airing that out and then having other members of the team be able to understand and support individuals is also unifying and bonding. It's just important for people to know these things. When you are forming the team, if you give people a chance to use a tool like MBTI or ECHO, they also then quickly know the strengths of each team member and the limitations or the preferences that could be, unfortunately, causing misperceptions. But when you have put some language around them and some understanding, people won't take it so personally. The team will be able to come together in different ways. You're also going to get some shared agreement on when and how to meet. You're going to figure out who leads and how, what the roles of each team member are. And with all of that, your charter is going to be much better for everyone involved. It's going to be much more useful because it's, here again, the clarity and the commitment that people are making to one another. You'll also want to be sure that responsibilities to the team have been clarified. This is often assumed. On a team, it's often assumed that everybody is going to have some equal level of participation, and everybody's going to figure out along the way what's expected from them. But you know what happens. We've all been there. Pretty soon you've got one person who's carrying the load, and other people allow that to happen because they've never been told it should be any different, or maybe they lack confidence, or maybe they don't want to step on that person's toes, so they become peripheral to the team as opposed to actively engaged and contributing to it. Or when there are assumptions about responsibilities, ultimately there are disappointments. If I assume that you're going to do something because it's the subject that you brought up, or it's the place where I think you have expertise, if I assume that, I'm setting us both up for a clash. You're going to disappoint me. I'm going to hold it against you. You're then going to wonder why I'm acting the way I'm acting. And weeks from now, months from now, we're not even going to remember what the breakdown started with. But we will mistrust each other, and it will be hard to recover from that. So instead, I recommend using something like a RACI model. If you don't know what that is, look it up, RACI. It's a simple tool where you create a matrix, and within a team, you decide the role for each task. For each team task, you decide who's responsible. That's the person or the group of people who are going to do the work. And you decide ultimately who's accountable. That's just one person. It's the point person who may or may not be actively doing the work, but that's where the buck stops. The person who's accountable is the one who is reviewing the work of others, approving the work of others, checking to make sure that the work of others responsible for that task and perhaps other similar tasks is all aligned. You also want to consider who just needs to be consulted. They aren't responsible, they're not actively engaged, but they have an opinion, Maybe it's a subject matter expertise person that you've named. Maybe it's someone who's going to be affected in some way by the decisions made or the work that's done by the team. They ought to be consulted. And last, the I stands for informed. This is a person who you don't need to consult along the way, but you do need to update periodically, because if they don't have the information, there will be issues with handoffs or with support that otherwise the team would have. So within the team, using a simple tool like RACI makes a dramatic difference. I highly recommend it. It's a do-it-yourself sort of a tool. And at the end of meetings or at milestones along the way for the group's progress, there will be action items that are determined. This should also be a deliberate, transparent process where all members of the team come to agreement about not only who's going to do what, that's RACI, but what are the deadlines? How are we going to update each other? What protocols do we use as a team? This will bring in your ground rules. And you'll set those check-ins. You'll work offline outside the team in perhaps smaller groups or independently, and you will live up to those expectations because the responsibilities have all been clarified. Seems simple. This is what we'd like to see happening, but more often than not, I'm afraid to tell you, but you already know, this doesn't happen, and then it causes conflict. It's unproductive conflict. Okay, when you do these things, clarifying responsibilities and making sure that people are on the same page, there's going to be better collaboration. That's what you want. You want good collaboration. And when you have good collaboration, you ought to reward it. That doesn't have to be expensive or complicated. It can be peer-to-peer. It can be a team leader. It can be somebody outside the team. But wherever it is happening, that collaboration should be called out. It should be spotlighted, because that's how people know what they should do more of. This is how people know what to replicate. When you reward collaboration, you're saying to people, I'm glad you did it that way, and I hope you'll keep doing it that way. You're setting the standard, and you're asking the people who are spotlighted to serve as role models to others. The purpose of calling it out is not just to recognize and appreciate someone, it's to set that standard and show others what it looks like. Now, it's collaboration. I do want to spend a moment on that word. Collaboration is often misunderstood. It's more than communication, although communication is a vital part of collaborating. And it's also more than compromise. See, compromise has an inherent problem. When we compromise, we both give up something. I give up a little, you give up a little. We both walk away with some of what we wanted, but we also have some unmet needs that could come back around to haunt us. Collaboration is where all of your needs get met and all of my needs get met. It takes longer. It's much more difficult to accomplish. But when there's true collaboration, big things happen. People buy in. They support decisions that have been made. They find extra boosts of energy and morale. They become more productive. They feel heard. Collaboration is the gold standard. Compromise is the interim solution. When you have to act fast, or when it's going to be extremely complex to collaborate in the way I'm describing, you make temporary compromises, but you don't forget about what needs were unmet. As team members who have committed to each other, you look for opportunities to come back around and enlarge the scope of your agreement so that you are collaborating and all needs have been met. And of course, this is about my needs individually, as well as our needs as a team and your needs individually. We're looking to collaborate around all of that, and the most effective teams do a really good job with all of the above. Now, when we are able to collaborate in that way, as we move through the process of forming as a team, One of the things that we'll also be aiming for, perhaps we want to include this in our ground rules, is that we're going to share decision making. And as we become more sophisticated as a team, and the team leader or the most experienced people on the team see this happening, well, it's up to them to then start letting go. To start letting go of some of their authority and control. To begin trusting other members of the team, because when you trust other people and when you empower them with decisions, some pretty cool things happen. First of all, I mentioned already, people will have a higher degree of buy-in if they truly feel a sense of belonging, if they feel respected and dignified, if they are now entrusted with decisions, they're going to be more engaged. Employee engagement, there are other webcasts on this channel that you can go and find more information about how to engage employees, but what this is all about is it's the emotional connection that a person feels to their organization. And because of that emotional connection, they have a commitment. It causes them to apply additional discretionary effort. And that's why productivity is a direct result of heightened levels of engagement. I'm emotionally committed. I apply additional discretionary effort. I work harder. We accomplish more as a team. We want all members of the team to have that kind of engagement. We want them to feel enabled, to feel like they can make decisions, that they can proactively address problems, that they can do things that will make a difference for the team. And this is all about empowerment. It's also about ennoblement. And I know those of you who are regulars, you hear me say this in almost every webcast because it's such an important concept. To ennoble someone means to make them feel worthy or important. That comes from encouraging them. It comes from listening to their ideas. It comes from making them truly feel like they're a part of the team and they have something to contribute. They're not just worker bees. They're involved at a higher level, sharing in decision making, learning and growing as they collaborate and get these kinds of insights. And that's why teams are such a tremendous opportunity to develop people in your organization who might have higher potential. Being a team member gives people a chance to learn and grow and demonstrate what they're able to do. But you don't get any of that if you don't give them opportunities to do more than the execution of decisions made by other people. Also important as you're doing everything I'm describing is that you create opportunities, specific opportunities, for people to continually build their camaraderie with each other. You're looking for the team to get more and more engaged with each other, better acquainted with each other, and more committed to each other as they work on their collective and their individual goals. So this is why organizations host team building workshops or team building offsites. It's not just because those are fun and energizing. Frankly, if you're doing it just so that you infuse some fun and some energy into the team, it's not going to be very well sustainable. If you want something that lasts, that makes a true impact on the team, you'll instead choose team building activities that serve multiple purposes, including that the team members are getting to know each other better, that they're experiencing and succeeding in challenges together, and that they are becoming a little more vulnerable with each other so that they have a higher degree of commitment and trust to each other. Now, this will sound very self-serving, but I want to be clear. Whether it's me or someone else, it's a really good idea to use an outside facilitator. Here's why. If a member of the team has to organize the meeting, plan the activities, facilitate from the front of the room or outside of the activity, well, then that team member misses out. They're not a full participant in the team building. They're having to focus more on the experience for everyone else, and they miss out on the experience. So every single member of the team should be completely engaged and involved as co-equal participants. And the best way to make that happen is to use a facilitator who can create that sort of an experience and address the issues the team might be facing, plus continually help the team to grow. It's okay if it's fun. Fun is good. Just don't let fun be the only outcome that you're looking for or the only thing that you measure as a result of the team building experience. Last but not least, your team building should often be a standalone event. It's really hard to shift gears. If the team's getting together to do the real work of the team, and then they have to shift into team building mode, and pretty soon they have to come back to the real work, well, it's challenging. Now, a good facilitator can help you create an agenda where that's possible, but just know that it's more challenging and it takes the focus off. It de-emphasizes the value of the team building itself. So look for opportunities. It doesn't have to be multiple days. It doesn't always have to be off-site. It can be shorter and still be effective. Just make sure that you are building opportunities for that to happen sometimes. Okay. When you are at it, doing these team building things or having regular meetings, while you're at it, don't neglect the importance of conflict. Conflict is essential for an effective team. Conflict is not necessarily negative. Conflict can be good. Conflict can be productive. Conflict, in fact, is necessary because if people don't have an opportunity to disagree or to raise questions or to look at things from all the angles, then they're only going to superficially be able to commit because they'll have reservations. Whatever they didn't voice because they were trying to avoid conflict, it doesn't go away. It lingers. It festers. It keeps them from being able to be all in on the work of the team or the decisions made by the team. So it's very important for someone to mind for conflict. Some teams, in fact, appoint that as a role. You've got a note taker, you've got a facilitator in the meeting, you've got someone who's going to create the agenda, and you've got someone who's going to play devil's advocate, just to be sure that the team doesn't too swiftly come to agreement because of false harmony or groupthink or anything else that might drive that. So mind for conflict, that means on purpose, try to surface alternative ideas and different points of view and a diversity of thinking. The devil's advocate can do this in all kinds of ways. Maybe you just provocatively throw bad ideas out onto the table to get people warmed up and practicing. Maybe as a team you insist on each decision having an exercise where you list the pros and the cons so that you don't miss them. Or maybe it's as simple as the facilitation of exercises and activities and group discussions and other ways that allow for ideas to develop and give everyone voice within the group so that they can all contribute. Whichever way you do it, and multiple ways are probably better. Don't take this away from the team. Don't inadvertently make it seem as if harmony is the goal of the team, because then people will superficially suppress their ideas and they won't feel committed, and pretty soon they won't feel a part of the team. They'll be distancing themselves from the decisions made by the team. And then you have a lot of cleanup work you have to do. You'll want to communicate over and over and over again, before the meetings, after the meetings, during the meetings, when the team first forms. As the team takes full shape, others will need to be involved in helping to over-communicate verbally, in writing, on slides, in between, making sure that whatever the commitments are, the action items, the RACI matrix, making sure that all of the tools and techniques are used so that each member of the team feels fully informed. If someone had to miss a meeting, well, they got notes. Someone caught them up. If someone was not participating as actively in the meeting, that they have a record of the meeting that they can go back to. It doesn't have to be every minute of the meeting, who said what, but the main ideas, certainly the decisions and the action items, need to be captured. And as you're communicating, teach team members to put communications and decisions in the context of the team's vision, that original purpose. Why did you come together? What are the benefits? What does success look like? The decisions you make and the action items that you ask others to perform should all be linked to the vision. This is the why of the work that you're doing as a team, not just the tactics and the steps. As much as possible, use collaborative tools like Teamwork on Microsoft or any other collaborative tool you might come across to make it easy for teams to access that information and to make it transparent so that there aren't secrets and subgroups and hidden agendas within the team. Keep it out there in the open and nobody will assume that that's what's going on. This will happen naturally, but if it doesn't, you'll have to circle back to it. No team can succeed long-term if there's an erosion of trust or if trust never fully forms. People won't understand that they have accidentally breached each other's trust. They don't know that if they don't understand that there actually are 12 different dimensions of trust. And I gave you an attachment that shows you those. If people don't know, for example, that being available to others makes you more trustworthy, then they might not make themselves available. And then when there's a vague sense of distrust about that person, they'll never know that's why. So help them to understand what it is that builds trust, help them to address inadvertent breaches of trust, help them by setting an example as a peer team member or leader or person who formed the team. It doesn't matter. You can still be a role model and be trustworthy as well as be trusting of others so that trust has a chance to take shape in the team and remains a priority for the team. Last but not least, internally, inside the team, competition has no place. Competition within the team, it's going to happen early on. People will jockey for position. They'll try to protect their turf. They'll come into the team as a representative of the silo function that they represent. But you'll break all of that down with the steps that we've talked about. And when you see competition for resources or one-upsmanship or anything else that's unhealthy to the team, you'll remind them that this is about our collective goal as well as the individual goal. And together we have a vision that we've been charged with taking the organization closer to. We can't do that if we're not in lockstep with each other. If we're competing with each other, we're taking away from each other. We're taking away from the team. We've got to be unified. Listen for language that begins to divide people. You and I instead of we takes people away from each other. The vision, and one of the reasons you created the vision and the ground rules early on, will serve you well when these types of things begin to emerge, and you can put a quick stop to them because those other tools will be in place. Now, there are many, many tools that you can use to do what we've described here. Many of them are in the form of assessments, and I've given you a few here. But you can also link to my previous webinar on team assessments. I gave you an attachment so you could easily find that. And I encourage you, though, if you have any questions or if you have any issues within your team, to be in touch with me. I really like it when people are joining me over on LinkedIn. I'll accept your invitation. We can have a conversation there. Or you can email me. You can subscribe to the Connect to Lead blog. You can download any of the many, many, many tools that we put into our weekly newsletter or on our website. And if you want a facilitator who knows about teams, knows about assessment tools, knows how to help your teams work through dysfunctions and get back on track, please think about giving me a call. I'd be delighted to help you out. Thanks for attending today's webcast. Hey, be sure and sign up for next month's webcast, I'll be talking in April about getting the most out of business meetings. Thanks for being here.